But at its height, Pan American World Airways connected the United States to more than 100 countries across 6 continents. Its blue globe logo was arguably the most recognized symbol in commercial aviation. And yet, in December 1991, Pan Am ceased flying entirely, its final passengers stepping off aircraft belonging to a carrier that had once defined what international air travel meant. A company that helped build the very concept of global air travel, reduced to archived documents and a brand name sold off to unrelated ventures. This is the story of how a dominant empire of the skies lost everything. Pan American Airways emerged in an era when crossing an ocean by airplane was closer to exploration than routine commerce. The airline helped shape international commercial aviation itself, pioneering transoceanic routes at a time when no regulatory framework, no infrastructure, and very little precedent existed for such operations. Pan Am did not simply enter the international aviation market. In many ways, it built that market from nothing, negotiating landing rights, establishing ground operations in foreign capitals, and proving that reliable scheduled service across vast distances was commercially viable. It was an enterprise forged in an age when the idea of routinely flying, paying customers across the Pacific or the Atlantic still seemed audacious. The model worked because Pan Am operated in a regulatory environment that effectively granted it a protected franchise. International routes from the United States were allocated by government negotiation, not open competition. Pan Am accumulated a network that was extraordinarily difficult for any competitor to replicate because the routes themselves were awarded through bilateral agreements between nations. The airline became, in practical terms, America's chosen instrument for international air travel. That position gave it pricing power, brand prestige, and a structural moat that appeared permanent. For years, would-be competitors simply could not access the routes Pan Am flew, regardless of how much capital they possessed. Growth compounded through network effects. Every new destination made the system more valuable to business travelers and tourists alike. Pan Am's fleet expanded to match its ambitions, and its brand became synonymous with glamour, modernity, and global reach. The airline invested in new aircraft types, terminal infrastructure, and operational capacity across dozens of countries. For decades, this flywheel reinforced itself. More routes attracted more passengers, which justified more aircraft, which enabled more routes. The cumulative result was a network spanning 6 continents, an operation of staggering geographic breadth that no single competitor came close to matching. By the late 1960s and into the 70s, Pan Am occupied a position of extraordinary cultural power. It was not merely an airline, it represented American confidence projected outward across the globe. Its operations spanned an unmatched international network, and its name carried weight in diplomatic circles as much as in travel agencies. The brand had become something larger than a transportation company. It was a symbol of possibility, a fixture of the post-war American imagination that seemed as enduring as the country's place in the world. But a structural weakness was already present, hidden beneath the scale. Pan Am lacked a meaningful domestic route network within the United States. International carriers need feeder traffic, passengers connecting from smaller cities to international gateways. Without domestic routes, Pan Am depended on interline agreements with other carriers to fill its planes. This meant it could not control its own passenger flow the way a combined domestic and international carrier could. The absence of a domestic network was not a minor gap. it was a foundational vulnerability that would prove devastating once the competitive landscape shifted. Every passenger who started a journey in Denver or Atlanta and wanted to reach London or Tokyo had to first fly another airline to reach Pan Am's gateway. Then the landscape did shift. U.S. airline deregulation in 1978 transformed the industry's economics entirely. Suddenly, domestic carriers that had built dense internal networks were free to expand internationally. They could feed their own passengers onto their own international flights, undercutting Pan Am's pricing and capturing traffic that had previously flowed through Pan Am's gateways by default. Pan Am found itself competing against carriers with structural cost advantages it could not match. The regulatory moat that had protected its empire for decades was dismantled in a single legislative act. Management faced decisions under enormous constraint. The airline attempted to acquire a domestic network, purchasing National Airlines. But integrating that acquisition proved costly and operationally complex, and it did not deliver the domestic scale needed to compete against carriers like United, American, and Delta, which had spent decades building those systems organically. The timing was poor, the price was high, and the strategic fit was limited. What Pan Am needed was a dense web of domestic connections built over many years. What it got was a partial network acquired at a premium, bolted onto an organization designed for a different kind of flying. As financial pressure mounted through the 1980s, Pan Am began selling its most valuable assets to remain solvent. Route rights, once the foundation of its competitive position, were sold to competitors. Each sale provided short-term cash, but permanently weakened the network that justified the airline's existence. This pattern, selling assets to fund operations while the underlying business deteriorated, is a hallmark of terminal corporate decline. The carrier was consuming its own foundation to survive another quarter. What had been built over decades was being dismantled piece by piece, with each transaction leaving the remaining operation less viable than before. External shocks compounded the structural erosion. The bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, in December 1988 devastated the airline's reputation for safety on its core transatlantic routes. Passenger bookings declined sharply on Pan Am's most important services. Rising fuel costs and recessionary pressures in the early 1990s further squeezed margins that were already thin to non-existent. A stronger carrier might have absorbed these blows. Pan Am, already weakened by years of asset sales and competitive disadvantage, could not. By 1991, the financial situation was unsustainable. Pan Am filed for bankruptcy protection and attempted to reorganize, but the combination of debt, diminished routes, weakened brand confidence, and relentless competition from better-positioned carriers left no viable path forward. Delta Airlines acquired Pan Am's remaining transatlantic routes and the shuttle operation, but the core entity could not survive. In December 1991, American World Airways ceased operations entirely. The airline that had helped invent international commercial aviation was gone. The aftermath was measured in both human and institutional terms. Thousands of employees lost their positions with a carrier many had served for decades. The U.S. Department of Justice records reference the cessation of operations and the employees affected. Pan Am's corporate archives and historical records were preserved by major institutions, including the Smithsonian, National Air and Space Museum, ensuring that the documentary record of international aviation's development would survive the carrier's demise. The Pan Am brand itself was later revived by unrelated companies in 1996 and again in 1998, but these bore no operational connection to the original airline. The industry itself absorbed Pan Am's network. Routes that had taken decades to build were redistributed among competitors within months. Delta, United, and American expanded their international operations using the very assets Pan Am had been forced to sell. The competitive landscape that deregulation had unleashed simply continued without the carrier that had once towered above it. The mechanism here is precise and worth understanding clearly. Pan Am's collapse was not caused by a single event, a single decision, or a single leader's failure. It resulted from a structural mismatch between the airline's network design and the competitive environment that emerged after deregulation. A carrier built for a regulated world, where international routes were protected franchises, could not adapt fast enough when those protections disappeared, and domestic competitors gained the right to challenge it directly. The asset sales that followed were rational responses to immediate financial pressure, but each one accelerated the underlying decline. By the time external shocks arrived, the airline lacked the financial resilience and network strength to absorb them. Pan Am's fall demonstrates that market dominance built on regulatory structure can evaporate when the regulations change, and that no amount of brand prestige can substitute for economic fundamentals once the competitive framework shifts beneath you. The moat was never truly the brand, the fleet, or the people. The moat was the regulation, and when it disappeared, so did the empire. The blue globe that once meant the future of flight became a museum piece, preserved behind glass where boarding passes used to be.